The great hall of Lady Whitcomb's summer ball glowed with the warm shimmer of candlelight, as though the chandeliers themselves were aflame. The air was filled with the soft swell of violins and the rustling of gowns sweeping over polished marble. Perfume, powdered hair, and the faint scent of beeswax lantern oil mingled into something familiar, something belonging only to nights in society's season. It was an evening meant for elegance, admiration, and the kind of soft, glittering cruelty that thrived behind carefully folded fans. Near the edge of the ballroom, half in the shadow of a white-veined column, stood a young woman in a gown of pale lavender silk. The dress had been carefully mended for the season, its seams reinforced, its lace reworked by a pair of tired hands. She wore it as gracefully as she could, though she was fully aware that it was considered out of fashion. Her figure was fuller than the sharp silhouettes currently praised among London's elite. Her face, soft and open, betrayed every flicker of longing she tried to hide. She carried herself carefully, as though attempting to occupy less space in the room than her body would naturally claim. She had attended enough balls to know the choreography of her place within them, watchful, silent, hopeful, and invisible. A cluster of young women glimmered not far from her, laughing behind delicate fingers. Their gowns were newer, brighter, stitched to flatter narrow waists and carefully sculpted posture. Their words were hush-soft but pierced just the same. "Do you suppose she imagines someone will ask her to dance?" one whispered. "Not unless someone loses a wager," another murmured. "And even then," the third added with a small sharp laugh, "he might rather pay twice the debt." Their eyes slid briefly toward her before drifting away again, as though even too direct a stare might suggest acknowledgement. She stiffened, but only inwardly. Outwardly, she maintained the small, polite half-smile she had practiced before the mirror. She had learned long ago that dignity was her armor, and silence her shield. Yet the words, though not new, found the tender places they had always known. The musicians shifted to a waltz. The room changed subtly. Gowns swayed, eyes brightened, couples formed with graceful familiarity. The dance was the centerpiece of the evening, the moment where admiration was made visible. And it was at this moment that the doors at the far end of the hall opened. The Duke of Harrow entered. His presence passed through the ballroom like the turning of a page. Conversation softened, then resumed with new tones. He was not simply admired, he was observed. A man returned from several years abroad, rumored to have seen cities of desert dusk and mountains that pierced the clouds. His reputation was one of quiet mystery rather than flamboyant conquest. He carried himself not like a man who needed recognition, but like one who endured it. Tall, dark-haired, his features were marked not with arrogance but with a cool reserve that suggested careful, private storms of thought. His coat was impeccable but not extravagant. His demeanor was formal, yet not frozen. He was a figure who drew the eye without demanding it. The ladies near the young woman brightened instantly. Fans fluttered. Shoulders angled. Voices softened to careful sweetness. The Duke greeted their circle with polite nods, though his attention did not linger on any one face. One of the women, emboldened by wine and the attention of others, offered a playful challenge. "Your Grace," she said, smiling with a sweetness sharpened for spectacle, "we have just been discussing who among us shall be granted the honor of opening the waltz with you." The Duke regarded her with a measured calm. "Have you?" "Oh, indeed," she continued. "We have decided you may choose any lady you wish. The most beautiful of the evening, perhaps. Or simply the one who pleases your eye most." Another laughed softly. "Yes, Your Grace. Choose anyone you desire." The invitation hung in the air like a shining coin tossed into water. He looked at them. Then at the room. Then at the edges of it. His gaze found the young woman in lavender. She had not expected to be seen. She had been trying very hard not to be. Yet in that moment, his eyes met hers. Not in curiosity, not in condescension, but with a steady, deliberate clarity. He lifted his hand and pointed to her. The laughter stopped. The silence was startling, clean, and cutting. A fan slipped from someone's fingers and struck the polished floor with a soft clatter. The group of women stared as though something improper, impossible, or absurd had just occurred. "She," one whispered, disbelief cracking her tone. "The one standing alone," another murmured. But the Duke was already walking toward her. Her breath caught. She did not move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat questioning reality. She felt painfully aware of the seams of her gown, the curve of her waist, the warmth rising in her cheeks. She had not prepared for visibility. She had certainly not prepared for this. When he reached her, he offered his hand, not dramatically, not with theatrical flourish, but simply. as though it were the most natural gesture in the world. "May I have this dance?" he asked. His voice was even calm. It held no trace of jest. She knew every pair of eyes in the ballroom was upon her. She knew the whispers would sharpen the moment she moved. She knew accepting could change nothing, or everything. Her fingers trembled as she placed her hand in his. "Why, yes," she managed, barely more than a breath. They stepped into the light. The room parted around them as he guided her to the center of the floor. The music swelled. His hand at her back was steady, respectful, and warm. Her steps were uncertain at first, but the gentleness of his lead steadied her. The whispers did not cease, but the music rose above them. For the length of the waltz, the cruelty of the room dulled as though at a great distance. She saw only the earnest calm in his dark eyes and the quiet assurance of his presence. He did not smile at her, nor did she at him. Yet something passed between them, something unspoken and undeniable. When the final note faded, he bowed to her with solemn grace. "Thank you," he said softly. She curtsied, breath unsteady. And as he stepped away, the room exhaled all at once. The whispers began again. But now they were different, and she was no longer invisible. Morning sunlight fell gently through her bedroom window, filtered by pale curtains embroidered long ago by her mother's quieter, softer hands. The events of the previous night still lived in her mind like a flame held behind glass, glowing, impossible, and too delicate to touch directly. She had danced. Not merely moved across the floor, but been guided, seen, chosen. Others had witnessed it, and though their stares had cut sharply, there had been one moment, just one, where the world had fallen away, leaving only the steady warmth of his hand at her back and the calm, unreadable depth of his gaze. She thought of it now and felt her heartbeat lift, as though her chest were not meant to contain such a feeling. But when she descended for breakfast, her aunt stood waiting in the drawing room, newspaper in hand and lips pressed tight. "My dear," her aunt said, tone gentle but strained, "you must understand that society is quick to speak and quicker still to wound." The young woman paused. "What has been said?" Her aunt hesitated before offering the paper. The column whispered in careful, pointed phrasing. "The Duke of Harrow, long admired for his discerning taste, surprised guests last evening with an unexpected choice of dance partner." The words did not mock outright, but the implication was unmistakable. Unexpected. Surprising. Unusual. Each word a silk-wrapped blade. Her aunt sighed. "I would not have you hurt, my dear. But London is not kind to those who do not fit its narrow forms." She nodded quietly. She had always known. Knowing never softened the sting. Yet later that morning, as she stepped outside to walk among the garden beds, lavender, thyme, and roses climbing the wrought iron trellises, a footman approached with a small white envelope sealed with dark wax. Her name was written in bold, precise script. Her breath caught. Inside was a single pressed violet, carefully flattened, the color still rich and deep. Beneath it, a brief message. "Thank you for your company. I found the evening improved greatly by it. Harrow." No flourish. No empty flattery. Simply sincerity. She closed the envelope slowly as though afraid it might vanish. That afternoon, when she attended a gathering at Lady Ashworth's salon, she noticed him again. He stood across the room, engaged in conversation with two older gentlemen discussing matters of Parliament. His expression remained measured, thoughtful. Yet when his gaze slid across the room to meet hers, he did not look away. Her pulse trembled. He did not smile. But there was something in his eyes, a quiet recognition as though acknowledging a promise never spoken aloud. But where recognition grew, so too did whispers. "She must be dreadfully bold to return his attention so openly," someone murmured behind her. "She is attempting to ensnare him. You can see it plainly. I heard her family is desperate. Perhaps this is their last remaining scheme." She felt heat rise behind her eyes, but she did not leave. She stood her ground with the same quiet dignity she had learned to tuck around herself like a shawl. That evening another note arrived. Not scented. Not ostentatious. Just simple and direct. "I hope today was kind to you. If it was not, take heart. The unkindness of others reflects their own fears, not your worth." Her breath trembled, but not from sorrow. For the first time in many years she allowed herself to sit still and simply feel. But the world does not allow peace to settle for long, not where envy and curiosity feed on one another. The gossip intensified. At a luncheon 2 days later, she found herself approached by a young gentleman known for his easy charm and cruel wit. He smiled as he bowed, yet his eyes held the spark of mischief sharpened into malice. "A remarkable turn, is it not?" he said softly, drawing close enough that others could overhear while pretending otherwise. To think one dance could cause such stir. You must be quite persuasive. She stiffened. I do not understand your meaning. Oh, come now, he continued lightly as though discussing the weather. It is simply amusing. One wonders how long the novelty will hold. Or whether the Duke is merely proving a point to the ladies who expected him to choose from among themselves. His tone was lazy. His words were poison. Before she could speak, another voice entered the space between them, cool, steady, and unmistakably firm. Your remarks exceed propriety. The Duke stood beside her, posture relaxed but unmistakably commanding. The gentleman faltered. I merely sought to offer conversation, he said carefully. The Duke's gaze did not shift. Then perhaps choose conversation that does not belittle others. The gentleman bowed stiffly and withdrew. Her chest ached, with gratitude, with confusion, with something deeper she dared not name. Yet protection, even when offered gently, can ignite more dangerous fires. By the next morning the whispers carried a new shape. She was pursuing him. She was attempting to trap him with sentiment, sympathy, or some imagined vulnerability. The idea spread because it was easier to believe cruelty than kindness. She received no invitations the following week. Except one. A small parcel arrived in a plain brown paper. Inside was a slim volume of poetry, unadorned, well-worn, clearly read many times. On the first page, a single line had been written. You need never make yourself smaller to be worthy of affection. Her fingers trembled over the words. Not flattery. Not romance. Something quieter and far more dangerous. Truth. She clutched the book to her chest, feeling its weight as though it were an anchor keeping her from drifting back into the shadows. But London was growing restless. Those whose status depended on beauty, majesty, entitlement, those who had mocked her for years, now felt the tremor of threat. And those who fear losing their place in the world do not surrender gracefully. A plan began to form in the hushed corners of drawing rooms and shaded alcoves. One aimed not merely to embarrass her, but to ruin her reputation entirely. It began with a letter. A letter she had not written. A letter someone intended for the Duke to read. One that would make her appear desperate, manipulative, and entirely without modesty. The city waited for the spark. And she, unaware, simply traced her fingers over the pressed violet once more, holding on to the memory of a single waltz where, for a fleeting moment, she had not hidden at all. Rain swept across the city in fine silver sheets, soft enough to blur carriages and rooftops into watercolor shapes, yet persistent enough to slick every stone step and glistening window pane. The world seemed quieter under the rain, the city's gossip momentarily hushed, as though London itself paused to listen for something unspoken. She crossed the conservatory alone. The glass structure stood at the far end of her aunt's garden, a place where vines grew thick and wild over wrought iron arches. Evening light filtered through the rain-streaked panes in muted amber shades. The air smelled of damp leaves and earth. She came here often to think, to breathe, to exist without being stared at. She held the forged letter in her hands, creased now, edges softened from where her fingers had pressed too tightly. The words inside were not hers. They were a stranger's parody of desperation, clumsy in tone yet cruelly effective. Written to make her appear eager, pleading, hungry to claim him. She had no proof of innocence. Only the quiet truth that no one else would bother to weigh. She did not cry, though something inside her bent under the strain. She stood among the rose vines, breathing slowly, as though trying to find the version of herself that had felt hope just days before. The conservatory door opened. She turned, startled. The Duke stood in the entrance, coat damp from the rain, hair darkened slightly where the drizzle had touched it. He had come without escort. For a moment neither spoke. He stepped forward slowly as though ensuring she could refuse if she wished. She did not move. I was told you wished to speak with me, he said, voice quiet. I did not send that message, she replied. Her voice was steady, though her breath trembled. I would never presume upon your kindness. His gaze moved to her hands. Then I am glad I came. She tried to laugh but the sound died before it formed. Are you? It seems my presence has already burdened you more than anyone should endure. You have burdened me? He repeated softly, not as accusation but astonishment. She closed her eyes briefly. Look what has come of one dance. I have become a spectacle. A thing for people to laugh at in their parlors while sipping tea. A warning or a joke depending on who tells it. They cannot fathom why you would look at me at all, unless it is to amuse yourself. His jaw tightened, but not in anger toward her. It is society that amuses itself, he said. Not I. The rain tapped softly against the glass, steady as a heartbeat. She lowered her gaze. I have spent so many years trying to take up less space. To move quietly, to avoid being noticed so that I might avoid being mocked. I learned to fold myself smaller and smaller until I feared there would be nothing left. She inhaled, slow and unsteady. When you asked me to dance, I thought perhaps I was wrong to hide. And then the whispers returned, sharper than before. I should have known better than to hope. He stepped nearer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Hope is not foolish, he said. Cruelty is. Her breath wavered. But cruelty wins. Only when we allow it to decide what we are worth. Silence followed, not empty but full. A silence of something beginning, not ending. He looked at her as though seeing not just her figure, nor her face, nor the way she had learned to shrink, but the whole of her. The kindness she never used for herself, the dignity she carried even when mocked, the quiet endurance that did not collapse even when cut. When I returned to London, he said softly, I found the city unchanged. The same glitter, the same polished manners, the same hunger to wound beneath smiles. I had thought I would feel at home again. Instead, I felt alone among masks. He exhaled, slow, deliberate. When I saw you at the edge of the ballroom, you were not performing. You were simply existing. With sincerity. With longing. With courage you believed was invisibility. I saw someone real. Her throat tightened. You think me brave, she whispered, but I am only tired. Tiredness can be a kind of bravery, he murmured. Her eyes lifted to his. Rainwater traced slow paths down the panes behind him, gold-hued from the fading sky. I fear, she confessed, voice scarcely audible, that I will be laughed at again. That I will humiliate myself by believing someone could, she faltered, care for me beyond pity or jest. He did not move closer, nor did he reach for her. His restraint was tenderness. Then I shall be the quiet sword against their laughter, he said. The words settled in the space between them like something sacred. Her breath caught. Her hand, almost without thinking, drifted upward, then paused, suspended in the air between them. Not touching. Just near enough to feel. His hand rose too, mirroring. Fingers nearly brushed, only a whisper of warmth. A trembling almost touch. Not a kiss. Not an embrace. Something deeper. A question. A promise waiting for permission. Their hands hovered there, suspended in longing, not daring to close the last fraction of distance. For that final step could change everything. Thunder rolled softly in the distance, though the rain had weakened to a light mist. I do not ask you to trust me, he said quietly. Not yet. I ask only that you allow me to earn the right. Her voice shook. And if society decides we are both fools? Then let them speak, he replied. Words cannot break us unless we bend to them. Her eyes glistened, not with sorrow now, but with the fragile, aching weight of hope returning. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She simply let her hand remain there, trembling, close enough that he could feel her warmth. Outside, the rain eased to a hush. Inside, the world shifted. Rumors did not spread gently. They struck like a sudden windstorm, toppling everything that was delicate and newly grown. Within days, the forged letter had done its work. Drawing rooms buzzed with knowing smirks. Parlor conversations paused conveniently when she entered, resuming the moment she left. Even the footmen, trained to silence, exchanged glances when her name was spoken. She withdrew not from cowardice but from necessity. Silence had always been her refuge. She walked the garden paths with the poetry book clasped to her chest, tracing the faded ink of his inscription each time doubt threatened to break her resolve. The violet, now dried completely, lay tucked between its pages like a heartbeat she feared to lose. Her aunt, though kind, urged caution. My dear, attachment to a man of his station invites scrutiny. Hearts such as yours must be guarded. She nodded, though the words hollowed her. She knew her heart was not made of armor. It was made of tenderness, stitched together through years of quiet endurance. And tenderness, she had learned, was easily marked as weakness. She avoided the salons and musicales for several days, though invitations continued to arrive, some sincere, most curious. What would she do now? Would she cling to the Duke? Would she apologize? Would she disappear? London waited for her misstep. London wanted spectacle. When she finally returned to society, she chose to attend Lady Halden's spring ball. The invitation had arrived handwritten, not merely signed, and Lady Halden was known to possess a sense of fairness absent in others. Yet even her ballroom could not soften the atmosphere that greeted the young woman upon arrival. Whispers rose like smoke. That is her. Yes, the one who wrote to him. Imagine such boldness. She will ruin him if he allows it. She kept her chin lifted, though her pulse hammered. Each step felt like a test of balance across a tightrope suspended above a crowd waiting eagerly for her fall. She stood as she had once before at the edge of the room. The comparison struck her sharply. How easily hope could return her to the very place where shame had begun. Only now she knew what it felt like to be seen. And to lose that warmth was an agony she had not expected. The Duke had not yet arrived. She both longed for and dreaded his appearance. If he ignored her, society would read it as rejection. If he greeted her, they would read it as scandal. She gripped the poetry book at her side, the leather warm against her palm. Across the ballroom, the same man who had tried to humiliate her before smirked as he approached, wineglass in hand. He bowed with exaggerated politeness. "My lady," he said lightly, "I fear the Duke is delayed. Perhaps the carriage horses refuse to carry so noble a man to so common an entanglement." His companions laughed beneath their breath. She steadied herself. "You speak boldly. Perhaps too boldly for someone who fears being seen as petty." His smile tightened. "Better petty than pitted." Before she could reply, the ballroom doors opened. The atmosphere shifted. The Duke of Harrow entered, composed, cold-eyed from days spent considering choices and consequences. He wore dignity, not arrogance. Authority, not presumption. And yet there was a quiet intensity in the way he crossed the room, as though every step had already been decided long before he arrived. He did not hesitate. Did not pause for greetings or bows. Did not offer acknowledgement to those who awaited him eagerly. His gaze found her instantly. The whispers rose to a soft roar. The young gentleman near her stepped aside, suddenly pale. The Duke stopped before her, inclining his head with respectful gravity. "If you are willing," he said, voice carrying clearly through the ballroom, "I would request the honor of this dance." The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice glass. Her breath caught, but she did not look away. She placed her hand in his, not with trembling uncertainty this time, but with quiet certainty born from surviving every whisper leveled at her. They stepped into the center of the room. The musicians, uncertain, faltered, then resumed, beginning a slow, elegant waltz. The floor parted around them, though not with admiration. This time, it parted with stunned disbelief. He spoke low enough only she could hear. "I have seen the letter." Her steps faltered, but his hand steadied her. "I did not." "I know," he said with absolute calm. "The words were not yours. They lacked your restraint. They lacked your truth." Her throat tightened, relief and grief entwining. He continued, voice steady. "They will not cease speaking. They will not cease judging. But I will not allow their voices to define you, or us." The word landed with the weight of a vow. The dance reached its final turn. He released her carefully, allowing her space but not distance. Then he turned, facing the room. His voice carried, not loudly, but with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. "I intend to court this lady," he announced, "with honor, with patience, and with full respect. Any suggestion to the contrary is false, and will be treated as such." A stunned silence followed. Some gasped. Some paled. Some looked away. The young gentleman who had mocked her earlier slipped quietly out of the ballroom, suddenly invisible. She stood beside the Duke, not claimed, not shielded, but chosen. Yet she knew too well that declarations did not end battles. They often began them. When the dance ended, she leaned in just enough for him to hear. "Are you prepared for the cost?" He looked at her, not as a man dazzled by affection, but as one who had already measured the consequences. "I am," he replied. "The question is, are you?" Her heart steadied. She did not answer. She did not need to. He already understood. Dawn broke with a pale, sober light across London, as though the sky itself were holding its breath. The previous night's declaration had not ended the matter. It had merely drawn battle lines. By morning, the city hummed with sharper whispers. Some claimed the Duke had lost his senses. Others said she had ensnared him by manipulation. The most vicious insisted the courtship was a temporary curiosity that would soon be abandoned. She heard none of these words firsthand, yet their weight pressed upon her all the same. Her aunt, worry etched deeply across her face, urged caution. "Respectable families are withdrawing invitations," she murmured. "There are those who feel you have stepped beyond your place." The young woman folded her hands in her lap. Her voice was steady though quiet. "I have done nothing but exist." "Yes," her aunt whispered. And that, for some, is offense enough. Later that afternoon, the Duke sent a message requesting to speak with her, not in the public eye but privately in the terrace garden behind Lady Halden's estate, where stone balustrades overlooked fields still touched by early spring chill. She went. The garden was quiet. The trees had not yet fully returned to bloom, yet small green buds showed the promise of the season to come. He stood waiting by a wrought iron bench, hands clasped loosely behind his back. When he saw her, he inclined his head not as a duke to a subject, but as a man to someone of equal soul. "I feared you might not come," he said. "I did not wish to hide," she replied. "I have hidden enough of my life." He nodded, slow, deliberate. "Then allow us to speak plainly." They sat, though not too close. The air smelled faintly of rain. A sparrow darted through a hedge, a small ordinary thing that felt profound simply because it lived without judgment. "I know what has been said," he began. "I know the cost of my declaration falls more upon you than upon me. My reputation may weather scandal, but yours is more fragile in their eyes." Her gaze lowered. "I do not wish for you to suffer on my account. And I do not wish for you to face this alone." Silence followed, cautious, like the moment before a truth is spoken that cannot be taken back. He continued, voice quiet but unwavering. "I have spent years surrounded by admiration I did not trust, expectations I did not desire, and a life I did not choose. When I returned, I believed I would resume my place without disruption. But then I saw you, standing alone, yet holding yourself with more dignity than all those who claimed to possess it." Her breath caught. His voice softened, not with pity but respect. "I chose you because you were not like them. And I continue to choose you." The words sank deeply, dangerously, into the places she protected most. But fear still lingered. Fear not of him but of hope itself. "What if it becomes too much?" she whispered. "What if the whispers drown us both?" He did not reach for her hand. His restraint was intentional. "Then we will face them until they tire. And if they do not tire, we will live beyond their reach." She looked up. "Beyond society?" "If necessary." She searched his face, not for charm nor promises but for truth. She found it steady as a heartbeat. Rain began to fall again, soft, barely more than mist. It brushed her hair, dotted his coat sleeves. Neither moved. He finally allowed himself to reach for her hand, not to claim but to offer. She placed her hand in his, not trembling now but sure. The moment held, quiet, immense. They rose. When they returned to the ballroom that evening, the effect was immediate. Conversations halted. Fans stilled. The air tensed. The Duke did not release her hand. His expression was composed, resolute. One matron, emboldened by outrage, stepped forward. "Your Grace, surely you cannot mean to continue this. It invites ridicule upon us all." He regarded her with calm that bordered on frost. "Madam, ridicule is only effective when one fears it." "I do not." Another voice chimed in, a gentleman with a smirk sharpened like a blade. "Society will not accept her." The Duke's gaze turned toward him. "Then society will adjust." A hush fell so complete that even the musicians paused. He looked to her, just a glance but filled with a depth that steadied her pulse. She lifted her chin, not for defiance but truth. "I have no desire to be what they call acceptable," she said. "Only to be seen as I am." The room shifted. Not because society approved, but because she did not shrink. The Duke's hand tightened around hers, warm, steady. They moved together through the hall, not triumphant but certain. Later, when they stood beneath the lamplight outside, waiting for the carriage, the world felt quieter. The rain eased to a whisper. The cobblestones glistened. He looked at her, not with possession but with understanding. "You need never hide again," he said. She exhaled, full, as though releasing years of withheld breath. "No," she murmured. "I think I never will." The carriage door opened. They stepped inside side by side. Not rescued. Chosen. They knew the road ahead would not be gentle, but neither had their lives been gentle before now. What mattered was that they faced it not alone but together. Always forward.